What's cracking, guys? Oops, wrong channel. But hey guys, Abel here, and in this video I'm inviting you for a workshop / roundtable discussion where I'm going to address with a couple of other people one of the most common guy problems, which is, should I cut or should I bulk? Now, why is this such a common problem? Well, if you look at the average guy in terms of what kind of physique goals they have, usually the end goal is a strong, muscular physique with definitely above average muscle mass, and that should be coupled with a lean, aesthetic kind of appearance with visible abs and all of that stuff. We also know that the generic path to achieving this goal is to go through phases in which you're purposefully eating more calories and energy than what your body is burning, which allows you, coupled with a good resistance training program, to put on additional muscle and strength and become bigger. Then you also have phases in which you're going through periods where you're purposefully eating less energy and calories than what your body is burning, which allows you to get rid of some of your excess body fat. Now, when you have a guy who is obviously way too skinny for his own good, I mean, his ribs are showing up all over the place, then that guy will definitely benefit from eating more calories than what he's burning to get a little bit bigger. Then when you have a guy who is obviously way too pudgy for his own good, then that guy should definitely cut some fat and be in a caloric deficit to get rid of all that excess body fat. But what about the occasional in-between kind of case where some guy is obviously a bit too soft for where he wants to be at, but at the same time he should also put on a lot of muscle to his frame? What should this guy do? Well, if the goal is short-term appearance enhancement, then usually the default answer is to try to get leaner. My YouTuber colleague Radu Antoniu has done a lot of work on this, and the short gist of the story is that if you're lean, your muscle mass that you already have will stand out more, your body proportions will improve, and even small muscle groups that you didn't even know existed will all of a sudden become visible. So if you have some event, a beach party or a reunion or something like that coming up anytime soon, then usually you will be better off by trying to get leaner, and you will most likely be more satisfied with what you see in the mirror. What about though if a guy is not particularly concerned about improving their appearance in the short term, but rather the focus is on progressing towards their physique goals, their long-term physique goals in the quickest, most efficient manner possible? Take for example a guy like me. It's obvious to me that I still have to put on a lot of muscle to my frame, but at the same time I'm also a little bit too soft for where I should be. On the other hand, I'm not particularly concerned about improving my appearance in the short term. I mean, it's snowing outside as we're speaking, it's cold, I have my clothes on and even my winter jacket all the time. I'm just not going to benefit from being shredded at this point. So should I cut or should I bulk? What should my focus be given my priorities, which again is to progress towards my long-term physique goals in the quickest, most efficient manner possible? Now, I do have my own thoughts on this and ideas as to what I should be doing, but to make it a bit easier on myself and to provide some extra education for you guys, I have brought on board some people that I trust and I know have the knowledge to make sound decisions on things like this. They're all people in the fitness industry and they are all ex-classmates of mine in the Bayesian Bodybuilding PT course. So without further ado, let's introduce them and have their takes on some of the questions I have for them. Wilfredo Thomas from Wilfredo Fitness, great content producer and ex-classmate in the Bayesian Bodybuilding PT course, puts out a huge amount of theoretical information as well as instructional videos on training and nutrition to help guys approach their training in a more scientifically sound way. You can find him on wilfredofitness.com as well as on Instagram and Facebook. Alex Ferrari, PhD, the bro scientist, have been on my channel multiple times and have finished the Bayesian PT course with the best results out of everybody. You can find him on thebroscientist.com as well as on Instagram and Facebook. Ivan Gavranic, also ex-classmate from the PT course as well as a personal trainer, a super shredded individual all the way from Australia, land of the kangaroos. And sharks, and crocodiles, and snakes, and spiders, and pretty much anything that can kill you, but it's a beautiful place. I plan to go there soon. Michael Gallagher from Germany, who is not related to Greg O'Gallagher, but is also an ex-classmate from the Bayesian Bodybuilding PT course, works as an online physique coach at gallaghercoaching.com, and you can find him on Instagram with the same handle. So them and I are going to discuss the following questions. 1. What is my body fat percentage and how can someone tell from pictures how lean someone is? Number 2. Should I or someone in my situation cut or bulk? And 3. How aggressive of a calorie deficit or surplus should someone in my situation go for? So let's start right away with the first question, which is, what is my body fat percentage and how can someone determine from shirtless photos how lean someone actually is? After all, we all know that every guy thinks that they are at 10% body fat once they see half an ab. So let's shed some more realistic light on this one.
But that's the thing, I can't see enough. All I can see is your upper body. I can't see your lower body. And this is where photos can be it can be very, very tricky to get an objective measurement as well. Some people, not many dudes, obviously a lot more dudes will hold their body fat around their torso, around their midsection, upper back, all those stuff, all those areas. But again, like, I don't know how much fat you're holding on your legs. For all I know, you could have all your fat on your legs and your upper body could look relatively leaner compared to your legs.
Okay, fail alert. Guys, as unrealistic as it sounds, your lower body also carries fat. So while it is true that males store large amounts of fat around the midsection, your lower body still has to be taken into consideration. Okay, let's go on.
So if we were just to base it off your upper body, I would say around anywhere between 13 to 15%.
Looking at your pictures, I would estimate maybe 15, 16, maybe 17 or so.
In my opinion, this is around 15% body fat because, I mean, we can see your abs, for instance.
Based on your pictures, I would somewhat estimate your body fat percentage like between 13 and 15%, roughly, because you hold a lot of fat on your legs and on your thighs.
So really, I looked at your back and your quads. You have some quad definition in the teardrop muscle, vastus medialis. And also you have some definition in your lower back and also in your traps and delts. So we learned in the course that lower back striations are a better indicator. And so that's pretty much the first place that I go. So you have what looks like some leanness in your lower back, but not a whole lot. So that, and then also looking at your abs, put me between, right at like 15 or 16, as opposed to 12 or 13, where you probably have a much more defined lower back and more defined abdominals.
Some good indications that you can look at the opposite of the mirror muscles, for instance, the back, lower back, and also in your lats, also your legs. But in my opinion, one very good indication is always the lower back.
Mainly, it would look like ab definition, lower back, if there's like the good old love handles back there, and on your thighs, mainly because you hold a lot of fat there, and many people do. So maybe look for like a little striation on your legs and thighs, and on your back. So that's a good indicator that you are in the lower digits. Not just the abs, because, for example, many people hold a lot of fat around their belly button.
Okay, so basically what we've learned up until now is that guys, once they have at least half a decent amount of muscle mass, will usually be able to see their abs at 15% body fat. So contrary to popular belief, if you see some ab definition, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're approaching the single-digit body fat level. Another important point is that a certain degree of ab definition may have indicated a certain degree of leanness early on in your training career, but later on, as your core and midsection gets more muscular and trained, that degree of ab definition is not necessarily indicative of that same degree of leanness. So a certain degree of ab definition early in your career may have indicated that you're at 12% body fat, but as you get more trained and muscular, that same amount of ab definition may be only indicating that you're at 15 or 16% body fat. Okay, the second question for this roundtable discussion is, should a guy in my situation cut or bulk? Now again, in this case, the question is not what you would prefer aesthetically. In my experience, from an aesthetic perspective, most guys would tell me that I should cut because I'm borderline obese by YouTube standards. And most girls would tell me that I shouldn't try to get leaner because I'm already too skinny. But again, that is not the question here. The question is, what is the most ideal for a trainee who wants to progress towards his eventual physique in the most efficient and quickest manner possible? And that eventual goal physique is of course a lot more muscular than what I am currently, and is eventually also a lot leaner.
After 15%, a person's ability to partition, or the body's ability to partition nutrients, it gets thrown off. More calories goes towards fat and less towards muscle. And then also hormone production goes in the tank. There's just a litany of reasons why you want to stay under 15% body fat. And so I would, for you, suggest cutting to maybe 12 or 13. The reason I say 12 or 13 instead of just getting to 15 is because 12 or 13 would give you a little bit of a cushion, you know. Yeah. So then on a bulk after the cut, you could, you'd have a little bit of leeway.
If you were to cut down to say 10% body fat, your potential for muscular growth is going to be a lot more advantageous when you start bulking again. The leaner you are, the more responsive you are to insulin and to other hormones that help build muscle tissue. Anywhere from 15% to above, I don't think it's a viable option to bulk, just because the majority of the weight that you will be putting on is not going to be muscle. It will most likely be body fat. So my best advice in this situation currently would be like, let's get you down to maybe, 10%, get you a little bit leaner, see how you feel, see how you look, and then from there, sort of transition into a bulk where we can obviously up food and, maintain you anywhere between 10 to 12%, depending on your goals, depending on how high you want to take it. But I think that would be a really good starting point. So getting you leaner first to make you more sensitive and receptive to weight training so you can maximize your bulk.
Yeah, so I would approach this like a mini cut, so just get low 12% and then start bulking up again. So since you don't have got a big goal where you have to be lean in the near future, I think that would be the best way to get huge.
So basically the consensus up until this point seems to be that I should not attempt to get bigger because I'm right at the top of that ideal body fat percentage range, which, if you're wondering, is probably between 8 and 16% body fat for guys. And me being at around 15% body fat, I'm just a little bit too fat to bulk at this point because I just can't allow a lot of additional body fat to come on. Now, you may be wondering why it is a bad thing if you still try to be bigger, above 15% body fat. And basically a couple of not so ideal things start to happen in the body once you get over a certain degree of fatness. For one, inflammation levels go up in the body once you get over a certain percentage of body fat, which is not very ideal for tissue repair and muscle growth. And then certain hormones such as insulin, which is a storage hormone, just can't function as well as they should. So normally this hormone helps to shuttle nutrients into the muscle cells, but because once you get too fat, your muscle cells are reducing the amount of receptors on them, they literally can't soak up all the nutrients that insulin is trying to shuttle into them. But your fat cells, unfortunately, have an unlimited capacity to still take up nutrients. Basically what this means in practice is once you get sufficiently fat, if you try to keep bulking and eat excess calories, those excess calories will be more likely to go into fat storage and not to muscle growth. Okay, now I have intentionally left the comment of Alex, the bro scientist, for last because he has a slightly different take on the matter than the guests that have spoken previously. So let's hear what he has to say.
Let's say counterintuitive or against what other people say, because let's say normally most coaches will let you cut. What I would do, it's bulk. And as soon as you see that you start losing definition and you start getting too much fat, I would do, let's say, a mini cut and then start bulking again. That's what I personally would do. You will risk, in my opinion, if you start cutting, to look very, very skinny. Because, of course, I mean, cutting makes you drier, but you need to, in my opinion, you need to build more muscle mass before cutting. And also another thing that I think is that we are in January. You're gonna take off your shirt in 6 months, let's say. You're gonna be around shirtless. So right now cutting, it's pointless in my opinion. I would focus right now just putting as much mass as possible.
Okay, so basically his take on the matter is that I should not attempt to get leaner and waste too much time cutting, because I should focus on eking out all the extra tiny amounts of muscle gains that I can, simply because I do not have enough of it. And certainly there is a lot of truth to it. One of the main reasons why I only have the amount of muscle mass that I have now is that in the past I was way too focused on trying to stay and get super lean. He also pointed out that at this point there's just no point for me to try to get super shredded and single-digit body fat, because A, I would just look way too small, and there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, certainly I can produce a couple of decent ab shots in good lighting when I'm at 10% body fat, but for the most part it's just pretty unimpressive. And on top of that, it is true that where I'm at on the globe, it's just cold out there. I mean, the beach season and summer season is far, far away. So I will not be taking off my shirt for beach reasons anytime soon. So what is the conclusion, putting together everything that we've heard from our guests? Well, I think that while Alex is right that I don't have enough muscle mass to make a really lean looking physique good, I think that at this point, because I'm just a little bit too fat to bulk, cutting and going into a calorie deficit for a short period of time is just something that I have to accept and suck up. And on top of that, this physique that I have currently is just a little bit too fat for my own liking. I mean, I know that unquestionably I will look a lot better at 12% body fat than at 15% currently, and at that point I don't suffer any of the negative side effects of being too lean. So I don't feel any more hungry, I don't have low energy, and certainly I don't look too small at that point. And remember that picking the right fitness goal or journey for yourself is always a combination of what you know to be optimal from an objective perspective and what your personal preference is and what you enjoy doing. Now, with all of that established, the last question to address is, if I'm going to cut, which in this case seems to be the right direction, how aggressively should I cut? Should I choose the slow and steady approach and attempt to lose fat slowly, or should I go for a more aggressive calorie deficit to get rid of that excess fat as quickly as possible?
As slowly as possible. You're not overweight or obese or anything, so cutting slowly, I think, would be the best course of action to maintain the muscle that you've already built. Yeah, so maybe with the 1%, base it on your current body mass and not necessarily aiming for a certain percentage point per week, because that reaches like a point where cutting 1% of your body fat per week after you get down to, you know, lower body fat percentages becomes not really feasible. If it's 1% or 0.7% for an intermediate, well then yeah, the 0.7% times your body mass, and as you lose body mass, just keep on multiplying.
Obviously, the less aggressive, the better. You know what I mean? I like to, if I want to get my client in a deficit, I'd rather do it through activity or rather through, you know, heavy weightlifting, you know, being on their feet all day, you know, really upping their NEAT versus cutting their food back. I don't like reducing food unless I really, really have to. So what I would do, if you sort of just came to me, I would keep your calories the same, or maybe even up them a bit, and just change up some training variables that I think could benefit you. Yeah, so anywhere between 0.5% to 1% of body weight is a good proxy. But then again, I would combine that with the caliper measurements that you're using or the body fat measurement that you're using, because I'm sure everyone listening to this knows that scale weight on its own is a pretty useless tool. I think that's a pretty good rate for fat loss. That is not going to really tap into muscle or lean body. Like again, if your diet is set up correctly and your training set up correctly, there's no reason that you should be losing muscle at this stage whatsoever. Like if that is happening, fire your coach, and just letting you guys know that now.
Depends on your different life stresses, so how well you can manage your other lifestyle factors. But I would approach it quite hard for the 2 weeks, just like getting it aggressively down and then go on the bulk again. So maybe like doing a few protein sparing modified fasting days. So, and keeping the calories on the training days a little bit higher again. Yeah, that would be my approach.
Okay, one final thing that I want to leave you here with, and you may be wondering about this, and I want to be completely transparent about this, is I have been training for an embarrassingly long amount of time to only have the physique that I have currently. And there are two main reasons for this, and I want you to avoid this mistake, and that's why I'm addressing this. So one of the main things is that early on in my training career, I have been way too obsessed about being super lean and staying super lean. And while it is true that in the short term, the quickest way to improve your physical appearance is to get leaner, if you look at the guys on social media and all these impressive physiques who inspire you, yes, they are all super lean, but at the same time, they have a substantial amount of muscle mass. And that amount of muscle just doesn't get built naturally if you're always insistent on getting super lean and staying super lean. The other big mistake that I have made during my training career is not making good use of my gaining phases. What this means in practice is that instead of being in a subtle caloric surplus for months and months on end to allow for muscle and fat to come on very slowly but gradually and consistently, I basically cheated on my diet a lot and lost structure once I went into a gaining phase. And that basically resulted in me spending a large portion of my years in a deficit if you add everything together instead of a surplus. And you want that to be the other way around. And the 2016 calendar year have been a perfect testament of this. This is how my year looked. From January until February, I went through a 4-week mini cut. Then from February till about April, I did a slower gaining phase, which was pretty good in terms of diet, not very good from a training perspective as I was coming back from an injury. From April till about mid-May, I was cutting again. Then from June till September, I was supposedly gaining, but in reality, it was a giant mess with lots of overeating and lots of mini cutting. So how productive this was, it's hard to tell, but my guess would be not very. Then from September till mid-November, a solid cut again down to about 10% body fat went pretty well. Then from the end of November until January, this again was supposedly a gaining phase, but this again involved lots of overeating interspersed with lots of mini cuts. So now if you look at my entire year, I had at least 20 weeks of straight cutting, and then if you add all the mini cuts on top of that, it's probably closer to 30 to 35 weeks of straight cutting. So you can see quite well that 35 weeks of cutting out of 52 weeks within a year is far from ideal. Most bodybuilding coaches recommend spending about 2 to 4 times as much time being in a surplus compared to being in a deficit. Okay guys, so putting everything together, everything that we've heard, what are the biggest lessons and main conclusions from this roundtable discussion? And last but not least, what is my actual plan for the upcoming weeks? Number one, the biggest conclusion for me is that early on in your training career, your number one biggest priority should be to put on lean muscle mass as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that also means that you should be minimizing the amount of time that you spend cutting and being in a caloric deficit. You should be doing your cutting periods quickly and efficiently and should not waste any more time doing them than necessary. The second biggest lesson is that for bodybuilding and efficient muscle building, you should be between 8 and 16% body fat roughly as a natural trainee. However, As a beginner or early stage intermediate, I would not recommend trying to dip below 10 or 12% body fat, simply because you will most likely be too small and you will be wasting unnecessary time trying to cut and keeping your calories way too low. So don't go below 10 or 12% body fat unless you have a very good reason to do it. So given this reality, I would avoid cutting at all costs if I could, but right now I just can't really avoid it because I'm a little bit too fat to bulk. So I will do a cut, and I will want to do it quickly and efficiently, and I will want to be in and out of it as quickly as possible. And given the fact that the ideal weight loss rate for a moderately trained and reasonably lean individual is probably between 0.5 and 1% weekly weight loss, I will aim to hit that, which will average out at around 0.7 weekly weight loss rate. And with this rate, I should be at roughly 12 or 13% body fat in about 4 or 5 weeks, and then I can actually go back to gaining. Okay guys, that was it. I hope you found all of this informative. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Subscribe to support this channel, and if you would like to see more stuff like this in the future. And if you've enjoyed, or if you're curious about what I've talked with my guests that I interviewed for this roundtable discussion in more detail, then click here, because I uploaded the best moments from these discussions, which will provide the most education for you guys and also the most amount of entertainment, because I really enjoyed these discussions with these guys. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.